Okay then, I just got finished watching TNA Slammiversary, and I'm gonna give my opinions on it. Um, the thing is, with a lot of pay-per-views I've reviewed before, I've said before that they need to build up to a bunch of really good matches at the end. But usually, even when like the matches in the beginning aren't that great or whatever, I kind of like that they have a presence about them. That I kind of like that there is something you can see out of it. There's something you can remember out of it, even if it's not particularly all that great. Like it's there, at least. But sort of an issue with a lot of TNA Slammiversary here was that a lot of the first half of the first half of the matches on the card didn't really have that much presence to them. And the first match, the Ultimate X match between Chris Sabin, Suicide, and Kenny King, is kind of an example of this. It felt just kind of like a standard X Division match. Like it wasn't quite as fast as you'd expect, and it did have like just a few of the creative spots. But the thing is, it didn't really have that much. It was just like 2 or 3 moments, and that's it. And I know a lot of times that can be all you need, but it didn't feel like it was enough for this. It overall just felt really standard and just like an above average TV style match. So I kind of gave it like a 6 or 7 out of 10. But that being said, every single one of the guys here did pull out something, that's worth mentioning. I don't think it was enough. That's why I say 6 or 7 out of 10. But something worth noting is that Chris Sabin is now your X Division champion. And this goes right into what happened afterwards. Hulk Hogan comes out during Chris Sabin's victory, where Sabin is bleeding like crazy for some reason. And Hogan comes out, and Hogan cuts basically a promo saying, "Yeah, come on, brother, you did great. And next, if you're still the champion by the time we get to Destination X, you can get a world title shot." So yeah, it established that. And eventually, Aces and Eights come out. And I'm not sure why this had to be on the pay-per-view. Like, they set up that members of Aces and Eights have to be in a 6-man tag team, which was already announced at the previous Impact, so I'm like, did this really have to be on the card? Anyway, the next matchup was the pre-announced match that seemed like they just made it up. Magnus, Samoa Joe, and Jeff Hardy versus Aces and Eights. Wes Brisco, Garrett, Bischoff, and Mr. Anderson. This, the biggest problem with this match is that a lot of the guys didn't have enough energy, and they try to pull off stuff kind of very similar to the Shield, but it just doesn't seem. But Aces and Eights just doesn't seem to be like as good at it. The biggest problem was just the first half just felt like I've seen stuff like this before, but I will say that the fat ass Samoan submission machine does well in this match as he does in most others, and was pretty much the most entertaining part of the match. It's kind of weird that between Jeff Hardy, Samoa Joe, and Magnus, Samoa Joe would be the one that pretty much gets the crowd most excited. It seemed like he was the one who was most into it. In the second half, I actually did quite like it. Even though I did kind of feel rather bland about this match overall, the crowd seemed really into it, and who knows, maybe a lot of other people were too. I gave it 6 or 7 out of 10. Jeff Hardy wins by doing a swanton bomb onto someone while they were pinning somebody else. Anyway, after this was a Joseph Park interview where it kind of they kept playing off the theme of like the creation of the company, and it was a pretty cool way of just establishing the setup. It's like, oh yeah, this has been happening all for all this time. But then Joseph Park's interview gets interrupted by Aces and Eights when they attack him, and then like it just cuts away on the image of Joseph Park having his hand like wiping down on the wall and seeing blood. Anyway, the next matchup was the Gut Check Tournament Final between Jay Bradley and Sam Shaw. This is a case you can tell they're trying, but it's just not working. The problem is these guys don't really seem to have that heavy of an identity or that much of a strong resonance with the crowd there. It was just like, oh, there's some white guys up there, I think that's it. They're just relatively unknown, so nothing they did left any kind of impact. Without any kind of identity that we can establish with either of these guys, we can't really say like, oh wow, But that being said, the match wasn't bad. You can tell that these guys were really trying their damnedest to try to get everything over, but it just was not working, and I think it was because they were so unknown. This kind of feels like something that probably should have been on TV. Either way, if you want a lot of people to see who would win a tournament for relative unknowns, you would want them to get as much TV time as possible. After this was an Austin Aries Bobby Roode interview. It was a cool interview that played off their chemistries as a tag team. And it did set up it did play into the tag team match later on. Anyway, the next part was Devon's match with Joseph Park. After all, Joseph Park was attacked earlier, so Devon basically cuts a promo, which I didn't hear because I was talking to my brother during that time. He says, he said the ref starts counting out Joseph Park, and when he doesn't come out, he loses by count out. And then he basically says, even if Abyss was here, I'd beat his ass too. And then Abyss comes down. So yes, the match was reworked. It's now Abyss versus Devon for the television championship. Now, I will say that I, along with everyone else, was actually really hyped when I saw Abyss. I was like, holy crap, we haven't seen this in a while, and this is actually a pretty nice change of pace from Joseph Park, especially with the expectations that it was Joseph Park. But it hit one big problem immediately. They just grounded Bully Ray, or I should say, Abyss way, way too quickly. Like, he comes out with all this momentum, all this big surprise, and very, very quickly, Devon just grounds him. It almost makes you wonder how the hell Joseph Park ever could have stood a chance against Devon by himself when Devon seems to be very intelligent and seems to have a very intelligent way of dealing with Abyss. But I will say that because Abyss is such a surprise character, and because of the setup with Devon, the comeback he actually does start to have that he gives against Devon actually does have a lot more weight to it than most other standard wrestling comebacks. It was a cool little match, but I don't think Abyss did enough. He was too grounded, so I gave it a 6 out of 10. Anyway, Dixie Carter comes out, and she says she is going to induct the next member of the TNA Hall of Fame. She has all the guys come out, all the roster, even the referees. Then she reveals the next member of the TNA Hall of Fame, Kurt Angle. And they basically show a video package of Kurt Angle's history throughout the company, and it was a really nice moment. And they kept cutting away, or they kept having like a mini camera on Kurt Angle, just seeing his reaction. You know what? It was a nice moment, just to see Kurt Angle's career, and to see someone like him being inducted into TNA's Hall of Fame. And afterwards, Kurt Angle actually cut a pretty good promo and did a pretty good job of putting over other people in the company instead of just praising himself. That being said, why is AJ Styles still not in the Hall of Fame? I think it might be because they're trying to get him over with this new character style that he's portraying, but it just comes off as kind of... Actually, I won't say the new character is bad. It's just like, come on. If there's anyone that should be in TNA's Hall of Fame, it's him. Anyway, after this was a bad influence interview, and like so many others, that was fucking awesome. Oh my god. Not many people can pull off being so hokey that it's just glorious. These guys have it down. I don't know what they've done, but it's freaking cool, man. And it goes right into the next match. Bad Influence, Christopher Daniels and Kazarian versus Austin Aries and Bobby Roode versus Gunner and James Storm versus Hernandez and Chavo Guerrero for the tag team championships. The opening was kind of dull, but at the same time, it actually did display some interesting chemistry between a lot of the guys. And it was a nice little rhythm of slow moments followed by really frantic moments. But the problem was, the slow moments felt a little dragged, and the frantic moments felt a bit clustered. And this is why I think the final moments that still followed this rhythm were actually a lot better, because it did just display a lot of really cool offense from Gunner, James Storm, and Austin Aries and Bobby Roode. And anyway, with a cool little ending sequence, James Storm and Gunner win the tag team championships. This was a cool match, but for how long it went, I think I kind of expected better. But still, there's nothing too heavy to complain about. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. Pretty good. Next up was the Brooke Hogan interview, which I completely ignored. And after that was Taryn versus Gail Kim in a last knockout standing match. This is going to sound very odd for anyone who's been watching wrestling for a while, but this was my match of the night. Like, it's so weird to, like, see a women's wrestling match where the women aren't just eye candy. They actually put on a pretty good match. Like, at first I thought Taryn was kind of overacting a bit because she was, like, moving kind of over crazy and screaming a little too much. But you know what? Gail Kim kind of, kept control and had some really cool offense very early on. And then Tarell started putting on some crazy stuff. This match was actually a lot more hardcore than you'd expect. And you know what? The psychology was actually pretty good. They kind of portrayed Gail Kim as sort of the methodical, very one-by-one or one-by-one segment sort of guy or sort of wrestler, much like Triple H. And they had Taryn just the energetic gal who would just wanted to fight, but that would also be her big downfall. And that was actually really smart. And it played into so many of the spots in the show. And the spots worked really well because you just don't see this stuff with a lot of women's wrestling. And just to see like Gail Kim slam her shoulder and face into a chair and fall out of the ring, freaking Taryn to dive out through the ropes, miss and hit the entrance ramp, and like for the final spot of like a bulldog off the ramp onto the ground. This was really surprising, and the match was really, really good. Like, the only thing I really had a problem with is, like, it might have been a little longer. It could have gone on a little longer, but you know what? That's fucking it. This is, in my opinion, the best TNA match I have seen all year. No one is more shocked at me than this. I gave it 9 out of 10. Pretty damn good match. Yeah. Taryn wins with that spot I told earlier where she bulldogged Gail Kim off the entrance ramp onto the ground. But yeah, this match was freaking good, man. Anyway, next matchup was Kurt Angle versus AJ Styles. The biggest opponent of either AJ Styles or Kurt Angle is the expectation of the matchup. And this is the big problem that sort of plagued over a lot of their matches, where it's like you just hear these two names and the match has such an expectance of grandeur that you sort of start to expect certain things. And so even with the explosive start, it's like, oh, okay, this is standard for what they're planning. And this is sort of tricky to watch under that mindset. That being said, the match was still pretty damn good. AJ actually, with his new personality change, they've sort of displayed some of that with a lot of the interesting sort of grab moves that he did. AJ and Kurt Angle still sell incredibly. Both guys actually pulled out some different offense. Like, Kurt Angle actually pulled off a few moves that you haven't seen out of him. I think he's trying to bring back more traditional wrestling, as part of his bring wrestling back motif. And I really do like that, spots that have come kind of dulled down, they actually put some new cool twists on them, such as the German suplex from the top rope suddenly becoming something else completely, among other things. And some of the submission-based reversals with AJ's new finisher were actually pretty cool as well. And the pace was actually really, really good. The biggest problem was, like, the kind of sudden ending and just the last few bits. Because, like, the problem with a lot of AJ and Kurt Angle's matches is that they have the ROH problem of having way too many false endings. But, so you kind of expected, all right, Kurt Angle slam, he's not gonna go down. But then that was the only finisher left in the match. Everything else was a bunch of reversals and then into a sudden pin, which was still good. It's just when you have expectations and you deviate from them, it kind of leaves a sense of disappointment. But that being said, they probably had to do this because, as I said, the biggest opponent of either of these two is monstrous expectations. Bit of a sudden end, but the match was really good. I gave it 8 or 9 out of 10. After this was a Bully Ray promo. It pretty much set Bully Ray's character as someone who just wanted to fucking hurt Sting. And he basically said, I'm beating you with a pile driver. And that set the focal point for the next matchup. And finally, the main event of Slammiversary 2013. Bully Ray versus Sting in a no-holds-barred match. The match started off pretty quick with Sting, pretty much getting the offense on very quickly on Bully Ray. And the number one problem with this match was immediately displayed because Sting, the thing about Sting is, like, his best offense is when he's moving a lot. This is why he sucks at punching people or kicking people, because his kicks and punches look terrible. And this is why I think the second half of the match was much better than the first, or like the last 2/3, I should say. Bully Ray just starts after the opening parts where Sting has the advantage, then Bully Ray just starts hitting him so much harder, and then when everything starts going a lot more hardcore, it actually gets much better. And it was really interesting to see Sting kick out of so many things, and I think it sort of worked in this one because the mindset was set very early on. And with Bully Ray actually being a pretty good reaction or mugging to the camera sort of guy, he actually did pull off the look of surprise very well, even though it did feel rather odd that of all people who could kick out, it was the 50-year-old guy of all people. And another issue of this match, other than just Sting's offense just not being very believable, another problem was that that there was just way too much interference later on, fucking a ton of aces and eights just started pouring in, and the question, where the hell is everyone else, could not have run out of my mouth any faster. The match was better than I expected, considering I kind of thought Sting would just not take any hardcore spots, but it just was not as good as the previous two. I gave it 8 out of 10, and that's a solid way to end a show. Alright, final thoughts on the product. The second half is what makes this show. Bad Influence versus Austin Aries. The four-way tag was really good, even though it might have gone on for a little too long. Tarell versus Gail Kim was amazing. Kurt Angle versus AJ was really good, and Bully Ray versus Sting was actually good. The first half was just kind of full of just a bunch of mess stuff, but you know what? As I said before, if a pay-per-view can build up to a really good climax, and even though it built up to a climax that hit too early, you know what? There's really not much to complain about. I give the only thing is, you could argue the pacing is off, or there's not enough true build-up, and there's a lot of little wasted moments. But you know what? I'll give this 7 out of 10. The only thing it needed was a more interesting first half. It had a first half where there were too many things that just felt bland and pointless, not taking up a space but not giving meaning to that space. And that's what I think was the biggest problem with this show. But that being said, this was still actually a pretty good pay-per-view, and I enjoyed myself, particularly the second half. Anyway, that's been this has been Mr. Sanders. What do you guys think of this pay-per-view? If you've enjoyed it so far, be sure to like and subscribe if you can. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys later.